Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to be going over the new additions to the recorder in version 1.2. The main centerpiece of this update is the new Timeline UI, which can be added to your scene by going to the prefab folder under GVL Recorder and simply dragging in the Timeline UI into your scene. We're going to be using the Canon demo in this video, as you may have seen in past tutorials. As a reminder, the Canon demo works by using the WASD keys to move left to right, up and down, and then the left mouse button to shoot a cannon. You can find this demo file in the examples folder under polling demo. Now, if you have the new Timeline UI within the scene, you can press F1 to bring up this new interface. And it doesn't look like much at first, but that's because we haven't added anything to show on it yet. You can toggle it off by pressing F1 again. And for now, let's start recording something to display on it. So in the new 1.2 version, we've added Runtime Inputs, which is a new section to the Recordable Manager prefab. And inside the Recordable Manager prefab, you can find this control panel associated with the timeline controller. Here you can start, pause, unpause, or stop recordings, as well as stop or start replays. All these functions are also bound to certain default hotkeys, which are as follows. The left arrow key starts a recording. The down arrow key pauses or unpauses a recording. The right arrow key ends recording. The up arrow key starts the replay. And the end key ends the replay. Unlike the traditional recording method of choosing a save location in a play mode before you enter the play mode, the file will be saved to a default path, which at the moment is just set to the default of test under the assets folder. In order to change this, you can go to the runtime controller script and simply change this local path. So let's go ahead and start a recording. You'll see in the console, once I've hit this left arrow key, it starts the recording. So now I can just launch some balls, hit that off there, and that should be good enough. So I'll end the recording now. And then I'll go ahead and open up the new Timeline UI. And then I'll hit the up arrow key to load that recording. Once we do this, you can see that the Playback UI shows up in this top section of the user interface. Here you can control the playback. So as you can see on the left-hand side in the scene view, we are moving back and forth on what we just recorded. We can also use it as the traditional way, where you can restart, play, pause, step forward, and step back through frames. But in order to get the true function out of the Timeline UI, we need to actually add something to these sections below. The easiest way to do that is going to be to add the name or the GUID of the objects that we're looking to add. For example, if we go to the projectile holder, this is about halfway through the recording, so we have 2 generated cannonballs that we can choose from. I'm going to select them both, and then in the recordable component section, we're going to add this to Timeline UI. You'll see that it adds it to this left section. but we don't see anything in this right section. And that's because we're currently zoomed in too far. This is only showing frames 0 through 9. So if we go ahead and use the scroll wheel to zoom out, we'll eventually see these two blocks, which represent the timeline or life cycle of these cannonballs within the scene. I'm going to zoom in a little here. Okay, that's good. And you'll see that these boxes give us a lot of detail about what is happening with these cannonballs. To start with, the right section of this UI is called the timeline box or window. The left side is called the Recordables window. This is where you add things to display on the right-hand side. For example, if we wanted to add a certain object, say the boxes, we can go here, type in boxes, and try to add that to the list. In this case, we don't have a recordable component attached to the boxes, at least one that doesn't have any components attached, so it's going to throw a fit. But you can add certain GUIDs, such as the cannonball we saw originally in the scene. So instead of clicking this button, you could get the GUID, copy this into the scene, and add it that way. You see that this is the one that was originally in the scene from the beginning. Okay. So let's talk about what we're seeing here on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, we're seeing these two cannonballs start at different frames. This big long white line is called the cursor, and this is showing which frame is currently loaded in the scene. So if we double click to any spot on this timeline, it'll go to that frame. Let's zoom in to where this cannonball begins. So we're looking at frame 389. You'll see on the left-hand side, when we're looking at the cannon, this is the frame that the cannonball was just generated. So this is the very beginning of its life cycle. And if we go ahead, zoom back out, hit play, we'll see that second cannonball come out around the 444 frame mark. And likewise, towards the end of the clip, if these cannonballs were to be deleted, this is the frame at which they are deleted. For now, let's talk about what's going on inside of these boxes. So starting with version 1.2, we've introduced something called custom events. Custom events are something that you can program into the recorder yourself and mark certain events that happen based on your use cases. For example, I have 3 different custom events that are happening to these cannonballs that I've set up for the scene. If we go to the code and go to the cannonball script, we can see exactly what's going on here. So one of the custom events is called a velocity check. Every frame that this cannonball is alive, we're checking to see if this frame's velocity is higher than last frame's. And if so, we just say, hey, recordable, this is the new custom event that happened this frame. It reached the velocity checkpoint, so record this event. Similarly, we have a random event going on. It's just randomly adding events. So now if we go back to the scene view, we can actually see what events are happening within our recordable boxes by going to the recordable, the timeline UI component. And here we have two different tables. The first table will list out all the different events that the replayer has found within the recording file. In this case, we have on collision stay, which is called whenever the cannonball is touching another object. We have random event, which just randomly happens. And we have velocity check, which happens whenever the cannonball is above a certain velocity compared to the last frame. But say we don't want to look at one of these. So say the random event, we can just tick that off. It disappears from the timeline. Similarly, the table below this allows you to change the color. So say if I want to change a random event to this color, the on collision stay to say the sky color, you can customize it to your heart's content. And so what this effectively allows you to do is to visualize when certain events are happening within your recording. Say you're building a shooter game and you want to know exactly which frame the bullet hits the player. Well, you have a hit function on your player or bullet to signify a collision. You can call for an event that way, and you'll see it show up in this timeline. Whenever you're creating a custom event, it is very simple. All you have to do is get the recordable component and notify it of a custom event. When you notify it of a custom event, you can choose to give it an event name and or an index at which to record that event. But if you don't give it anything, it will just call the function based on the function that called the notify. So in this case, with the velocity check, we're not giving it a name, so it just assumes that the name of the custom event is velocity check. With this, you're able to easily visualize all the events that are happening within your gameplay. Hopefully that'll allow you to easily debug things and track what's going on. Another feature in 1.2 is going to be the children recordables. So this means that if you have an object that you have a lot of children objects in it, such as a hand, which has, say, 50 bones in the fingers, and you just need to record the position and the rotation of those fingers, you can just add one recordable to the parent hand, select give all children recordables, and the recorder will take care of the rest. In this demo, we have a simpler example of these boxes. So this box object holds 10 different boxes. So we give it the give all recordables, give all children recordable setting, tell it to use the default recordable settings so that each of these boxes is a child, which is recorded by its parent, and it gets the basic components to record, being the position, the rotation, and also the is kinematic function if it has a rigid body. And last but not least, we've added a ghosting function into the new version, which allows you to add in copies of original recordables and change certain aspects about that ghost to fit your needs. One easy way to do this is to use the menu on the recordable window on the left-hand side. So for this second cannonball, we can left click and it'll prompt us to choose an option. We have several different options here, one of which is delete it, which means it just deletes it from this list, takes it out the visual. But the one we're looking at right now is the create ghost. So when we create a ghost, it'll create a copy of the original object and then add it into the scene. So if we go to this frame, we'll see that there's a ghost cannonball, and that one is directly on top of the original. So we have the original, the ghost, but it doesn't really do us much if they're exactly on top of one another. So what we can do is, with the ghost, we can move it left or right. And what this does is it shifts the data left or right in the timeline and allows us to displace that ghost to whenever we need it in the timeline. So now if we go back and hit play, you'll see that the timeline has these two cannonballs back to back. So we have the original and the ghost, which is slightly ahead. And that pretty much wraps up the features for this iteration of the recorder. There's definitely more bug fixes and content to come, so look forward to that. And thank you as always.